I am John Paul Hoey, and this is my presentation on Julia Alvarez. Early life. Julia Alvarez was born in 1951 in the Dominican Republic. It is in the Dominican Republic that she spent the first 10 years of her life. During this time, she gained a sense of an extended family and was interested more in mischief and entertainment in her early years as her environment was not conducive to reading. In the Dominican Republic, it is very important to be able to tell a good story. In order to entertain, Alvarez learned how to recite poetry at a young age. Alvarez, who would become an acclaimed writer, was molded by her culture's traditions. Little did she know that her native storytelling would have such a great impact on her writing and her career in the future. Forced out. During Alvarez's time in the Dominican Republic, Rafael Leonidas Trujillo was the dictator. Trujillo was the dictator since 1930. He had an oppressive regime that was backed up by strictly enforced laws. Tensions started to rise around 1961 amongst the Dominican people. They were tired of Trujillo's rule. An uprising began, and Julia's father was involved in it. There was a failed attempt to overthrow Trujillo and his government. Following this, the Alvarez family was forced out of the country. At 10 years of age, Julia Alvarez had to leave behind her family, her friends, her community, her home, and life as she knew it behind, and travel to a new land. New beginnings. At the age of 10, Julia Alvarez and the rest of her family made their way to New York City. They settled in a middle-class neighborhood in Queens. Alvarez's parents did not like the neighborhood, and consequently, 3 years later, at age 13, Julia was sent by her parents to a boarding school. From that age on, Alvarez explains that she never returned to live with her parents on a permanent basis. Alvarez was on her own. She remained distant from her classmates as she didn't know how to speak English. She could not relate to their way of life, as she had only been in the United States for 3 short years at the time. She took this time to master the English language. With this, she would be able to better adapt to her environment and become successful in her new world. She described the English language as her new homeland. Education. I mentioned before that Alvarez went to boarding school. After she finished boarding school, Alvarez was set to take the next big step in her life and become a college student. She decided to attend Middlebury College in Vermont. It is at Middlebury that Alvarez found her true passion for writing and decided that she wanted to become a writer. After she graduated from Middlebury, Alvarez moved on to another big step. She achieved her master's degree in creative writing at the very prestigious Syracuse University. Not only was Alvarez the first person in her family to attend and complete college, she went on and achieved a graduate degree in a language that was foreign to her. This is a feat that is not just impressive for Alvarez, but it's impressive for anyone, even if they grew up speaking English. Career. Once Alvarez finished school, she returned to her alma mater, Middlebury College, and started teaching. She was a professor at George Washington University and also the University of Illinois. During this time, Alvarez's career on a public level began. She began writing poetry, and in 1984, she was finally published for her work Homecoming. Over the next decade, Alvarez continued to publish poetry. During the mid to late 90s, Alvarez started writing novels. She published 7 books in 5 years. Not only was Alvarez a great poet and author, she became a great public speaker as well. Her works were published in several notable magazines, including the New York Times Magazine and the New Yorker. Alvarez was well on her way to becoming a household name in the United States. Double identity. Alvarez had to overcome several obstacles in becoming successful in the United States. In general, Latino writers or immigrants must invent themselves as they figure out their two cultures, Latin American and North American. Writers like Alvarez struggle to find their identity as they break down cultural barriers. Alvarez overcame these struggles through finding a medium to express her own traditional values in a form understandable by Americans, the English language. Each one of her poems or stories has a message. She used her characters to express the plight of immigrants, especially Dominican Americans. Alvarez worked hard to represent Latinos and Latinas in the United States, and through her work she allowed the stories of Latin American immigrants to be understood by people across the country. How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. One of Alvarez's most notable works was the first novel she ever had published in 1991, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. In this novel, Alvarez portrays her experience immigrating from the Dominican Republic and adjusting to life in the United States as an American citizen. There is a major conflict in this novel. That is cultural division. Alvarez's family was divided. Her parents did not want the family to lose their Dominican traditions, yet Yolanda, who was the character who was supposed to be representing Alvarez in this story, and her sisters needed to adapt to an American lifestyle in order to succeed. They had to learn how to speak English. They had to make American friends. They had to learn how to adapt to an Americanized environment. They basically had to Americanize themselves. This was much to Yolanda's parents' dismay. How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents continued. The second theme in this story was Yolanda finding her identity. Yolanda, being a symbol for Alvarez, also feels a disconnect from her native country and her family. Yolanda and her sisters act rebellious. They go against what their parents want. Alvarez in her writing describes it as a revolution in the family. They stray away from their Dominican identities and metaphorically lose their accents, as the title of the book says. Yolanda finally realizes towards the end of the novel that she does not have a single identity. Through her experiences, through what she does in her life, she creates her own. Yolanda does not conform to any single way of life. Just like Alvarez, this is expressed in Alvarez's writing. Alvarez in New York. This class is titled The People of New York, so I would be wrong not to mention the effect that New York had on Julia Alvarez and the effect that Julia Alvarez had on New York. Although it may have been a struggle when Alvarez first came to this city, having to leave her family behind, having to leave her friends behind, her home, her way of life behind. Coming to New York ultimately allowed her to find who she truly was, and that led to her becoming very successful. It seems that the hardest times in our lives end up producing the most beautiful outcomes. They allow us to grow as people. They allow us to find our flaws, to find our strengths. They allow us to find who we truly are. Alvarez's story not only paves the way for other immigrants searching for their identity in a new country, Alvarez's story allows Americans to see how difficult it could be for an immigrant coming to a new country. It gives a new perspective on the life of an immigrant. And Alvarez did a great job in portraying how she made it through the tough times in her life. This has been a presentation on Julia Alvarez. Thank you very much.